why did you stay?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you stay? And again, I had 2 girls. I needed the job. And why should I have to be the one to leave from that position? I was trying to get promoted. But again, a comment from Don Simmons that he shared with another employee there, my black face would never get promoted. That's the type of environment that I worked in.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. Today, as our country honors the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we discuss the brutal racism that our guest, Celeste Hodge Growden, experienced as an Anchorage municipal employee during the 80s and 90s. The discrimination she faced inspired her to civil rights work, and she became president of the Anchorage branch of the NAACP in 1993, an office she would hold longer than anyone else before stepping down in 2001, just before being named by Mayor Mark Begich as deputy director of the Anchorage Office of Equal Opportunity, later becoming the director. In late 2019, she revived the Alaska Black Caucus and currently serves as that organization's president and CEO. Hello, Celeste Hodge Growden. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you for the invitation.
So for those of us who are just getting to know you, some of our listeners may not be familiar with you. Where are you from?
Actually, I was born on Fort Meade, Maryland, but I have lived in Alaska just about all of my life. My father was in the Air Force, and so we transitioned to Alaska many, many moons ago. I don't even want to say the year because I don't want to date myself. But because he was in the military, we've lived in Japan and Italy, which is where my sister was born, in Brindisi, Italy. And, just here in Alaska, where my 2 girls were born and currently live. So Anchorage, Alaska, yes.
Where did you go to high school?
I went to high school at Bartlett.
My understanding is that after high school, you started right away in an entry-level position with the municipality. Is that correct?
That is correct. I started with the municipality and the word processing division. And from there, I went to the facility maintenance department and worked in entry-level positions for decades. Even though I was told I was not eligible for promotional opportunities because I did not have a degree, a college degree, I would eventually secure one from UAA, first obtaining my associate's degree and then my bachelor's degree in social work, but still could not get promoted, although I would train individuals who did not look like me, who did not have a degree, and they would become my boss and then go on to other promotional opportunities. And it was just really a trying time, being the only African American in my entire department, the only position that was slated for deletion, although the lowest paid. I was often told it was because of budget cuts that were needed. You can go ahead. It brings back such horrible memories for me. I remember during Halloween, Andrew, that there was an opportunity for my boss. And at the time I was in word processing, and there was my boss was Barbara Ordway. And I'm not going to try to protect anybody anymore. So I'm going to share names because that's my reality and it's accurate information. And so, but I remember a conversation where Barbara had shared that she was going to be dressed up as Miss Annabelle, and her husband her husband was going to be her nigger.
Oh
And,
my God.
For that individual to be your boss, where you felt that if you were to say something, there would be some consequences. So I just didn't share or say anything. My truth was silent. That is just one situation that I remember from my early years with the municipality of Anchorage. I'll just let you ask the questions.
Well, what I want to know is, do you think she told you that because she thought you would think it was funny? Was she trying to get permission from you to do that Halloween costume? Or what do you think was going through her mind? Why did she tell you that?
Honestly, I think it's because it was acceptable during those times, and there was no avenues. There wasn't avenues for one to complain, because what I found was when you did complain, you were the one to receive the brunt end of consequences. So, and I think about when I worked in facility maintenance, and my position, again, entry-level positions, was the only position to be slated for deletion. Only Black in that whole department of over 100 employees. And how I fought, I ended up attending an assembly meeting and advocating for them to put my position back in the budget. And I'm thankful that they did put the position back in the budget, but that brought about consequences as well.
Now, did you just show up at the meeting and testify about what was happening, or how did you communicate with the assembly about what your situation was?
Well, so I remember Robbie Robinson. He was the AMEA union president, and he stood with me, and we both went down to the assembly meeting. But I was the one that spoke, and I was not well versed on what to expect at assembly meetings. It was definitely not like it is today, but it was intimidating for me to speak out against the administration, asking the assembly to secure my position, which they did. And I remember Dick Cheney and Mark Begich. I remember Dick Cheney making a comment like, I find it really strange that of all of the employees within the department, the administration wants to cut the lowest paid position of the only African American within that department. He said those words, and then they voted, and my position remained in the budget.
Can you talk about the decision not to go to college after high school? Or was it not part of your family's culture?
Oh my gosh. So I am the only individual within my family. I have a sister and a brother that went to college and received a degree. It is not something that it wasn't discussed in our family to go to college. It was more about making sure you secured a job and work to take care of yourself. And so it was something brand spanking new. I never even thought about it, honestly, until I was in a position where I was trying to get promoted. And they said, the municipality, the employer said, you can't do this because you don't have a degree.
And can you speak about that requirement? Do you think that you did your job better after you got the degree?
No, I think that I was great at my job already because, again, and I'm not knocking entry-level positions, but I think for me, the degree, it just complemented, but it wasn't absolutely something that I needed, that I had to have.
Right. So it was kind of like just a way of holding you back. It wasn't that you couldn't continue to do your job and excel because you didn't have this degree.
Absolutely. And as I shared, I trained people and they would become my boss. So, and the other thing too that I have to share is I remember, and I'm so thankful for this conversation in a way, but it is so hard because these were very painful days. But I remember when an individual by the name of John Husey promoted me. He actually did something that the employer did not approve of, because now typically this individual, John Husey, could hire his own people and they would just sign off and it's a done deal. But when he completed the paperwork to promote me, the employer, Don Simmons, overturned that promotion, null opportunity, and then went to John Husey and said, you need to watch it or we're going to do something to you, along those lines. Like he felt, I remember John, I mean, we had a conversation about the whole issue and he felt bad. He was actually shocked, really, that they would not only overturn the promotion, no paperwork, but attempt to discipline him.
So you spoke earlier about one of the reasons why you didn't speak up is because people who spoke up were the people who ended up getting punished. After you went to the assembly and asked them to fund your position so that you were not cut, what was the environment like when you went back to work?
It was worse than before. It was worse than ever. First of all, how dare me, or who do you think? This is how I felt. They first of all were shocked that I would do something like that. But then, every time I turned around, there was an issue that they were trying to discipline me for. For example, I remember back then you were able to sign up for classes at UAA if it had a direct relationship to your job, or if there were an opportunity for you to be promoted. So the city would pay for you to go to school. So the city paid for a class. And, during my downtimes, because I was in this entry-level position and my mind wasn't being challenged, so I would complete all my work and just be left with nothing to do. And so I would pull out my homework and start working on my class assignment. I remember one day being called into the office and they had discipline paperwork for me. They had my union rep there and they disciplined me. They suspended me for 30 days for doing an assignment during work. Now, mind you, there were other people that were attending UAA, taking classes that would also do their work when there were downtimes. And so I shared that, but I was told that I needed to just focus on me and worry about my situation. And so while others were allowed to do their homework or their work when times were slow, that didn't apply to me. So they suspended me for 30 days. Also, during that time, I had 2 girls. I was divorced. And so I needed my paycheck. I'll never forget, though, because God was he's always with me, because even though that was a challenging time for me, I'll never forget Larry Crawford, who took up a collection for me. It was him and a couple of other employees, and they went around the department and actually raised money to pay the salary that I would have made plus additional funding. And so I ended up taking my two girls to Disneyland, and I sent them a thank you card from Disneyland, which they really didn't appreciate. No matter the struggles, I honestly know that God will always provide. Again, those were some trying times back then in that entry-level position for decades, not being able to get promoted. And, people ask me, they often say, well, why did you stay? Why did you stay?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you stay? And again, I had two girls. I needed the job. And why should I have to be the one to leave from that position? I was trying to get promoted. But again, a comment from Don Simmons, he shared with another employee there, my Black face would never get promoted. That's the type of environment that I worked in.
So when they took up the collection for you, is it because they knew that the way you were being treated was wrong, that it was not fair?
Yes. And here's what I want to say too, is these employees were white.
Mm.
That's the beautiful thing about this community that we live in. There's some bad people, but not everyone. So yes, they recognize, they would talk to me about it. They did feel badly. And I think that's why they raised so much money, is because although they couldn't change things for me because they weren't in powerful positions, they felt that they could help in some way, and they did.
Do you feel like this experience is what inspired you to your political work?
Let me just say that I believe, because not only was I in that environment and I lived it for so many years, it made me, it made me into the person that I am today. I could not imagine anyone having to go through what I did and remain there. It had to have been because I was purposed for that position so that I could help others when the time was right. I didn't see it at that time, but I have a passion for this work because I know the reality. I know how it is. You can't tell me that it doesn't exist.
Mm. So I know that you've thanked Mark Begich for his role. Can you talk a little bit about how he helped?
When I was going through the struggles within the department in those entry-level positions, I actually reached out for help outside of the municipality because, unfortunately, the department that exists within the system does not work. They don't have the resources. And, unfortunately, it's just one big troubled system, in my opinion. They don't have the right number of employees in those divisions to do this work. And so the complaints don't get investigated properly. And for whatever reason, a majority of the complaints come back non-substantial findings. But so I reached out to the NAACP, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. They are the oldest and largest organization, civil rights organization in the world. And so I reached out to them, and unfortunately, because they didn't have enough volunteers, they were going through stuff themselves. They weren't in a position to help me. And so I actually became a member of the NAACP, and I ran for vice president, and I was successful. And then I ran for president and was successful at that as well, and served as the president of the NAACP for nearly a decade. And so while I was doing that work, I had encounters with Mark Begich. And so while he was on the assembly, I was president of the NAACP. And I was advocating for diversity within the municipal workforce. And I had a lot of conversations with Mark. Well, when Mark Begich became mayor, I believe God used Mark to appoint me to one of his directors. He appointed me to the Office of Equal Opportunity as a deputy director. And within a couple of years, I became the director. I'm just so thankful for him because he cracked the door and allowed me an opportunity. And as I've shared many times, that's all we need is the door to be cracked. And then we can bust the door wide open, utilizing our gifts to do the work that we are called to do. I thank Mark because not only did he provide an opportunity for me, he created that position that he placed me in. There wasn't a deputy director position, but he often shared with me that he would rather have me on his side, helping him to do what is right than out there working against not against him, but working against all of the systems that the city has, which keeps a lot of BIPOC communities out. Also because of Mark, retirement is based on your 3 high years. And although I worked for the city for 20 something years, when I retired, I actually am doing very well on the retirement because of my 3 high years.
It sounds like that what Mark Begich wanted was somebody to help change things from the inside rather than somebody on the outside just constantly criticizing the system. And I think that's kind of like a philosophical debate that kind of exists in our country right now about whether it's possible to make significant change inside a structure that has been so problematic. I mean, do you think change is possible, that it's just keep the structure in place and change it from the inside, or tear it down and build a new structure?
You have to tear down some of the structures out there, and you have to have people in place that believe in making things better. Sometimes people just can't see, or they don't want to see, that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. I'm just, I believe we can make it happen. I do believe that we can build that beloved community too, but we have to first recognize that there's problems.
You were the longest serving president of the Alaska chapter of the NAACP. Why did you step down?
I stepped down from my position with the NAACP because I received the appointment from Mayor Mark Begich, and I didn't want there to be a perception of a conflict of interest.
Well, then my understanding is that you revived the Alaska Black Caucus back around the time of the George Floyd incident. For those of us who really don't have a lot of inside knowledge, tell us about the Alaska Black Caucus, why you revived it, kind of what its history was, and how it differs from what the NAACP is.
Alaska Black Caucus was formed in the 70s, and they were the premier organization back in the day. I mean, they championed a lot of rights for the Black community. Along the way, people passed away. They moved out of state, the members. And so 2 years ago, late 2019, recognizing that there were some serious issues surrounding justice, surrounding education, health, economics, we revived the organization. And the difference between the Alaska Black Caucus and the NAACP is we're a local organization. We see a need and we're immediate. We are in the trenches. We don't have to go to the national office like the NAACP for approval. We make our own decisions. And the NAACP, we work with them on several things. Like we are a non-partisan organization. We don't endorse candidates, just like the NAACP, but we do have similar interests. And those interests are what I just shared. We're concerned about education. We're concerned about economics. We're concerned about health and justice.
So let's talk about education. Recently, with Mayor Bronson's budget, he had taken out the funding for the school resource officers and was going to move it back to the district. I know there was some debate over whether he really cut it, but he cut the funding. But through my organization, the initial response was that we had some teachers who happened to be white who said that we needed to advocate hard to get these school resource officers back in the schools. We also had some African American members who spoke up and said that they were actually uncomfortable with police officers being in schools, and that they felt that they themselves, some of them were younger members who had been in school in Anchorage with the resource officers, and so that they felt like that those school resource officers weren't really on the students of color side all the time. Like, they really felt uncomfortable. So I just wondered if you could speak a little bit about your feelings about the school resource officers and how they should or shouldn't fit into the Anchorage School District.
So let me just say, I do not support the current implementation in our schools. I realize that, I support the concept of SROs. My concern with SROs in the schools really comes down to school discipline, policies, and practices that remove students from learning opportunities. And research and data show that BIPOC students are disproportionately affected by such policies and practices. And so my concern has to do with the data, who's being suspended, the expulsions, and school-based arrests. We're dealing with the situation right now in Eagle River at the elementary school, where there's a young Black boy who is an outstanding student, has received nothing but O's on his report card. And the administration, because of a situation that has not even been investigated yet, they're recommending expulsion. And why is that? I believe so. There's a lot of work that needs to go into the whole SROs and who's being suspended. And I'd love to be at the table, have a seat at the table when that discussion takes place.
So staying in this vein of discussing police, let's talk about the body camera debate. I've heard some people express discomfort that about a year ago, which feels like an eternity ago in COVID times, you negotiated directly with Eagle River Assembly members on behalf of the ABC. Can you explain what actually happened there?
The Alaska Black Caucus has been in the forefront for body cameras for a long time. I know that there's been lots of talk. For me and the Alaska Black Caucus, it's time for action. We have been discussing it for far too long. So when we continued to advocate for the body cameras, I was tired of hearing that there was no funding. We had no money. And so I will always reach out to individuals, regardless to party affiliation, on issues that we can work jointly on. As I said, the Alaska Black Caucus, we're a nonprofit, 501c3, nonpartisan organization. If I had it to do again, I'd do it the same way. Although there are a lot of things that we don't agree on, there are some things that we can work together on. And on those things, I believe that we should come together to solve an issue, solve a problem, whatever it is. And so,
do you still feel that way today? Since we're naming names, do you still feel like, especially after the behavior we've seen over the past few months, that you can negotiate in good faith with Assemblymember Jamie Allard?
I know that there are a lot of concerns or issues that individuals express about Jamie Allard. But again, if there are concerns or issues that I feel that Jamie might be able to help me with, I will reach out to her. And I will reach out to anybody that I believe has an interest in that particular subject to help move us to where I'm trying to get to.
Some Black politicians have spoken on the record in public about feeling more welcomed as political candidates by the Republican Party than from the Democratic Party, specifically in Alaska. And this was a surprise for me. But what I heard one candidate say is that a Black political candidate presenting to the Democratic Party saying, I'd like to run for this office, they say, you're not ready. And they do the exact same pitch to the Republican Party, and the Republican Party says, yeah, let's do it. And I wonder if you have heard that before, and if you have any comment on the opportunities for BIPOC candidates in Alaska.
Well, I definitely see a need to have more BIPOC individuals running for all of the positions, and I support that 100%. Nationally, I see the Democratic Party more supportive of candidates of color. I've never ran for office, but like with everything else, I believe it's hard to support what you're not used to supporting. And I say that to say that there needs to be a conscious effort to recognize the need to support and uplift diversity, not just when candidates need our vote. There's been a lot of talk about the diversity and how individuals or parties welcome it, but the action is lacking. And so if that means financial support, or if a BIPOC candidate comes to you and says, I want to run, then we need to support them. And let me just say this again, we're a nonpartisan organization, but at the same time, we do support BIPOC candidates because we recognize that they support our interests for the most part. I'm not saying all.
I've heard when I was getting ready for this interview, a couple of different people described you with the words powerhouse. I wondered if you have any shortcomings or weaknesses. Is there anything that you feel like as a leader in the community that you could do better at?
Oh, I could do better at a lot of things, honestly. What I bring to the table is my lived experience. I may be short in some areas, but I do believe that I make up in other areas. My weakness, honestly, is trying to do it all. My weakness is growing weary and doing good work. My weakness is fear of not getting things done because there's so much work out there to do.
Can you name a couple of the big goals for the Alaska Black Caucus in the coming year? Like what are the priorities right now?
Well, the priority for the Alaska Black Caucus is to get the Equity Center that we recently purchased, thankful to all of the donors, to get the center fully operational, inclusive of the funding necessary to run our programs and the center. And I'm also looking into, or the Alaska Black Caucus we're looking into the possibility of operating some type of educational system to help our kids who are falling behind. That's always been a need. And so we hope to work that into our goals.
For our listeners who might just be hearing about this Equity Center for the first time, can you describe what the Equity Center will be and how it will operate?
Well, for the longest time, we have needed a place where we could actually accomplish our work. The Equity Center allows us to do that. We will be a centralized facility where we offer office space to our BIPOC communities, whether it's business or organizations, and we run our programs. And so we purchased the building, and we're just looking forward to finally seeing that come to fruition.
Mm. And do you have a timeline? Do you know when it'll be open?
We're hoping for the latter summer because it's going to be undergoing some major renovations.
Mm. And for listeners today who would like to participate with the Alaska Black Caucus, contribute in some way, how do we do that?
Well, I thank you for this question. So if you'd love or like to join, and I hope you love to join our organization, the Alaska Black Caucus, you can visit us at thealaskablackcaucus.com and join as a member. You can become a member if you believe in our mission, which is to champion the lives of Black people and the BIPOC community in 4 core areas: education, economics, justice, and health. We have several different committees that we definitely could use help with. And, we just try to do the best we can for our community, recognizing that there's, again, lots of work for us to do.
And last question, can you recommend a book for our listeners that you want them to read?
Well, I'm hopeful that many have read the Bible already, but I definitely recommend the Bible because it provides instruction on how we're to live our lives. And it's not enough just to read the scriptures, but to apply it to our daily lives. Sometimes I fall short, but I strive to live the word daily. And I just want to end with this. I know that there's a lot of quoting of scriptures at the assembly meetings, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actually living the scriptures so that the interaction that we currently see at the assembly meetings don't take place, but instead we show love, even though we might disagree.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one bonus question, if it's okay. Because the Bible has been used by some as a weapon against the LGBTQ community, I ask, as a member of that community myself, if you can offer some words of reassurance for those who might be uncomfortable about this topic.
And that's why I believe there needs to be the coming together and the conversations. And I'd be willing to host such a conversation on our Sunday community conversations. If you would connect with me and let's get it scheduled. Let's focus on the now. I honestly just want to take us forward because we cannot afford to go backwards and stay in all of that mess, because that's what it is to me.
I'd love it. We'll definitely be in touch.
If that's not because I recall this question, similar question before. And believe me, there's no need for me to have to skate from anything. I'm just speaking some truth. Let's do this.
I'm with you. Let's do it. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure. It's been very interesting. I cannot thank you enough for giving us your time so generously.
Well, I just want to thank you for this opportunity and just to shed a little light on the Alaska Black Caucus and the fact that sometimes people that are different than you have their story, their own story, and to not discount their story because it is their lived experience.
Thank you to Celeste Hodge Growden and gratitude to Corey Coolidge for making this podcast listenable. Special thanks to you, our listeners. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe and recommend us to a friend. We also host Zoom events. Please visit eastanchoragebbookclub.com for more information. We'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions. Email us at eastanchoragebbookclub@gmail.com. In 2 weeks, we have a candidate for the new East Anchorage Eagle River Senate District, Donna Mears. She'll be running against current Senator Laura Reinbold. Please tune in.